Shiran is, in my opinion, is honestly like one of the most interesting and influential entrepreneurs I think in the world. Like just being able to work with and touch the people that he gets to touch. And I hope that you guys get as much excitement and entertainment out of this as I did in the first interaction that I had with him. One of the most amazing things about Shiran that I know that a lot of people talk about is like he's the CEO, or he was the CEO of TELUS, which was one of the largest property and real estate management companies that there is. But for me, one of the coolest things about this thing is that Shiran has really been able to go from real estate to being, well, from really being on Wall Street to being a real estate broker to now like writing a book. And so like Shiran, to be honest with you, is just a man minus the shirt that he has on today. Shiran is 100% the man.
I'll piggyback on that briefly, and I'm a numbers guy, and so I'm going to brag on Shiran because he would never do it himself. But Shiran was actually he came. So his entire family sold everything they had to just get Shiran to the United States, and so he's absolutely the truest embodiment of the American dream. Came here with nothing, just two hands and a brain and a lot of work ethic, and was able to build something truly spectacular, and was able to do so while maintaining one of the best characters of anyone that I've met as an entrepreneur. And I meet lots of entrepreneurs and a lot of entrepreneurs who are significantly less successful than Shiran with significantly greater egos. And so just a few quick hits on Shiran's story. He had his first exit like in his 20s, and it was a 25, it should have been a $25 million payout just to him, but because of how they contracted the deal, he actually ended up getting screwed on it and only got multiple seven figures. I'll put it that way. And after that, retired and was a professional tennis player. And so he's played around the world and he knows the highest levels of competition. So he has that side of, he has the teeth side of that as well. And then after, retiring for 5 years and playing tennis around the world, he's like, you know what? I should do something cool. So he reached out to his mentor. They're like, you should get into finance. And he was like, okay. And so of all the places, he decides to go to the number one bank in the world, Goldman Sachs, which unless you're in that world, which I came from briefly, it's hard to appreciate how incredibly difficult it is to get hired at Goldman Sachs. Like you have to have cured cancer on the first try after you won Wimbledon by the time you were 7. And so he moved in there without any background in finance, worked his way up. And then from one of the companies he was doing a lot of business with, they were like, you're very smart. You should come work for us. And so he actually led that company to a multiple billion-dollar exit. And that was the first multiple billion-dollar exit he had. After that, he got into the real estate world and then built TELUS to another multiple billion-dollar exit. And so he's one of the most successful entrepreneurs that I know. And he's one of the few people that I trust, which is saying a lot. So anyways, I wanted to give you a little bit more color on who Shiran is and how he got here and why it's so spectacular that he took the time to talk to everybody today.
One thing I'll just add on top of that is just, when we look at like people that we want to associate with and people that we trust to, mentor us in different areas of life, like we never look at someone who's just like solely really good at that one thing. Because if Shiran was solely only good at building businesses and entrepreneurship, then there's lots of people who can make lots of money and be good at that one thing, but then the rest of their lives are falling apart. And Shiran is not that person. He's a good person. He has great values. He has a mission. He has character. He has a great family. He has good work-life balance. And so he's got his shit together. And that's why we respect Shiran so much, is because he's done so much in that sector and that area. And he has an awesome life outside of that. And so just when you guys, what you guys know, like we want to bring you people only that inspire us, and that we admire, and he is one of the people that we can count on one hand.
Yeah, this is kind of fun. You guys should keep going. Like yesterday, all my wife told me was, "Hey, I asked you to buy this, but you didn't buy that. Like, can you go back to the store and you drop this and fix your clothes?" Like, so this is fun. We should. Hey, Dave, we should do this often because. It's awesome to get. I appreciate you guys so much. And just so you guys know, I'll say one thing. Alex and Leila have been really great friends and mentors to me. And super grateful to be here to share and to support you guys in any way that I can. So thank you. Thank you for the kind words. Should we jam?
Awesome, man.
Let's jam.
Let's go.
Awesome. So I get excited about this stuff. So here's what I'm going to do. We have a short amount of time. I'm going to talk fast. And the goal here is to provide some level of context. So I prepared the original conversation that I had with Leila was, hey, let's just do a bunch of Q&A because everyone's in a different place. But I thought, well, that doesn't really make sense because let's get everyone some context on a few lessons and a few ideas first. So I have a few notes and a few slides that I'll share with you that I think will provide a really great foundation for how we think about the world. And then we can all have share ideas, have some Q&A, and figure out how we can build and grow this stuff together. Is that cool? Just give me a wave if that sounds cool. Awesome. All right. So let me see if I can pull this together. You can see my screen, right? Quick thumbs up if you can see my screen. Cool. So I was spending time yesterday and I was thinking, what is the greatest way what are the things that I can communicate to all you leaders that will really dramatically help you, not just in 3 years, not just in 3 months, but right now, right today. And Alex and Leila and I have talked about several of these concepts, which I want to share with you. So there's 3 things I want to get across to you today. Thing number 1 is how to understand any investment. And I think this is the number 1 thing that perplexes a lot of people is like, what is this crypto? What is this Airbnb? Should I invest in that? Like, how do you understand any investment? The second thing is, well, how do you evaluate if it's right for you? And the third is, if you think it's right for you, how do you implement an elegant plan? And what I'm going to share with you is a very simple framework on how you can actually work on these things. So to make all of these 3 things work, there are 3 things that are needed. All right, and I'll give you all the slides and everything. You're welcome to chat along if you'd like. So here are the 3 things that need to be at work. Thing number 1, thing number 2, and thing number 3. Thing number 1 is we need some frameworks, because without frameworks, it affects our thinking. So we need our frameworks to help us think. And I'll give you 3 of them today that will dramatically help you think in a much more elegant way. Number two, we need language. And today I'm not going to hold back on terminology, because the limits of your language are the limits of your world, right? Like if I use a word for a certain reason, it's important. We all need to know the word. And when we have good language, don't be afraid about language. It's okay to understand the terminology, because when you understand the terminology, you can communicate really well. And when you can communicate about a topic well, it dramatically reduces your stress and your fear on that topic. And that's a really powerful thing. And 3, people always say, well, if you can think well and communicate well, what about the implementation component? Well, I will tell you this. Implementation in the investment world is all based on community, because when you have a great community, they can teach you how to implement. There is nothing worse than suffering in silence. There's nothing worse than trying to do things on your own. There's nothing worse than second guessing when you're by yourself and you're thinking, oh my gosh, should I have bought $10,000 of Dogecoin? Which Alex and I did, which is crazy, but I'll say that differently, right? But does that, so this, if we take nothing else away from today, let's not be afraid of a few frameworks that help us think better. Let's not be afraid of language and terms, and let's really focus on, hey, which community can I be a part of? What support system can I have that will help me kind of build and grow the way I implement the stuff? So I'll take like a 10-second pause here. What of this resonates with you? Either put in the chat, do a quick wave. What of this resonates so far? Language? Yeah, Ed says language for sure. Good, Jacob says language as well. Communication. Totally. If you have the language, then you can communicate. If you know good salespeople, they have really great comfort and command over the language, right? And when you have good language, at Goldman, they call this verbal dexterity. If you have good verbal dexterity, you can do really great things to have great communication. Community to drive implementation. A lot of people like the language. Jody says she likes the community. All right, cool. So with that as the framework, let's actually look at the pieces very quickly, and then I'll show you where I'm kind of going to go with all of this today. So I'm going to talk to you about 3 key frameworks, and these 3 frameworks are the only 3 things that you need to know to get you 80% of the way, because we're all in this Pareto, efficiency thing. If you get 80% of the way, you win. So I'll just give you 3 really quick frameworks. And this is what they're going to look like. The first framework is going to allow you on how to understand any investment. The second framework is going to allow you to understand how to evaluate any investment. And the third framework is going to allow you to figure out how to implement in the right order. Okay? So let's fire through these 3 frameworks. And these, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 5 minutes, 5 minutes, and 5 minutes. So I'm going to fire through this stuff. All right, here we go. So first framework. Framework number 1, on how to understand any investment. By the way, I'm gonna promise you, you're going to come across an investment in your life that you don't understand, and it's totally okay. And here are the things that I will actually tell somebody when someone tells me, "Oh, you should invest in this XYZ thing." And here are the words that I use. "Hey, Alex, I'm just a simple guy. Can you please explain this to me?" Like, if you say that, you completely make the situation so clean and so simple. Like, put yourself in, "Hey, I'm just a simple guy. Let me ask a bunch of questions." Be okay with asking as many questions as you want. No one expects you to know everything. We think we should know everything. You can ask as many questions as you want. But the problem is we don't know what kind of questions to ask. I want you to think about, anytime you have a question, think about putting it in the parking lot. The parking lot. So the parking lot. And this is the LOT. L, I'm not going to go easy on the terminology because we need to know it. L is for liquidity. O is for ownership. And T is for terms. Any investment, to understand it, just think about what kind of liquidity do I have, what kind of ownership do I have, and what kind of terms do I have, which is the L, the O, and the T. All right, let's walk through this very quickly, and I'll give you a quick example. Anytime you think about liquidity, if you put your $100,000 in the bank at Bank of America, you have daily liquidity, or 100% liquidity. It means you can go grab it almost anytime you want. If you put $100,000 in Apple stock, you technically have 3-day liquidity, because when you sell some stock, it takes 3 days to settle, so you have 3-day liquidity. When you invest in crypto, you have 24-hour liquidity, because you can sell your Bitcoin right then, anytime, any place. If you invest in a real estate deal, you may have no liquidity for 3 years, because that's what the deal is modeled on. It is really important to know how much liquidity we have, because that tells us how much our capital is locked up for. This is probably the number one thing that most people need to know when it comes to investment, because the higher the liquidity, almost always the lower the return. So if I have 100% availability that I can pull my cash out at any point, like the bank's like, "Well, I'm giving you full liquidity, so I'm not going to give you a lot to work with this money." I always like to ask, and the question you would ask is, "Oh, so how long is my capital locked up for?" That's a very fair question to ask. And that allows us to know, that way you're like, okay, can I deal with me being out of this capital to work with for 3 years, 5 years, etc. That's number 1. Number 2, ownership. Ownership comes in 3 parts. Part number 1, you own it directly. Part number 2, you own it indirectly. And part number 3, you don't own it at all. So let me give you some very quick examples, and they're all okay, they all work. If you own it directly, you buy some Apple stock, you own some Apple stock, you win. You own the stock directly. Indirectly, here's number 2. You put $100 in a fund, and the fund invests in a bunch of stuff. So you have ownership in the fund, and the fund owns a bunch of stuff. So you own assets indirectly. And the last part is, you don't own it at all. There's a lot of Airbnb strategies where you can go rent an apartment for $1,000 and then Airbnb that. You don't own anything. You just own the cash flow. And that's okay too. But it's important to know what you own at the end of the day. Here's how I think about what I own. I always ask somebody, so where does my name go on your document? That's all I want to know. If my name goes somewhere, if my name goes on the loan, my name goes there. So I own a piece of that. If my name goes in the fund, I just want to know where my name goes. So ownership is all based on one thing. Where does your name go in that investment? That's number 2, ownership. All right, here's number 3, terms. Terms are really simple. We do terms on our sales contracts. We do terms on everything. Terms only have 2 parts of the puzzle. What do I need to do? And what do I get? Hey, you need to do $5,000 a month for 6 months. That's what I need to do. What do I get? I get a 6% return, and that's what I get. Terms are very simple. What do I need to do? What do I get? A lot of times people will say, well, it's $100,000 now. You're like, okay, cool. What do I get? Well, you may get your $100,000 back in like 6 years. They're like, I understand that, but that's fine. I just need to know. Terms are always, what do I need to do? What do I get? If you just ask questions in and around this, whenever I am evaluating an investment, I just go like that. I just keep going around and around, and I keep asking questions until I can understand and answer the questions of, hey, do I understand liquidity? Do I understand ownership? Do I understand terms? So before I go any further, liquidity, ownership, and terms, that's your LOT in understanding any investment. Take a 10-second pause. Questions, thoughts? Does that kind of, at a high level, give you a way to ask questions to figure out where you are when something's coming up? Super clear? Ed likes it? Awesome.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So with like so for terms, so it's like, what do I do? What do I get? Would you consider a liability something you receive?
Say that differently.
Like a term. So it's like if we have like I'm going to be liable for something, or would you consider that under like ownership?
Oh, that's totally good. So that's that the liability will be under the ownership because now I am responsible for something. Yeah. Alex, it's a great question because wherever your name is where it's connected to something. So I always think, oh, am I signing on a loan document? Where does my name go? And if I'm going to sign somewhere, what does that make me responsible for? Always think parking lot, liquidity, ownership, and terms. All right, let's go to the second one really quick. It's fun to do. This is my favorite one. I'll actually use an example of an investment that I totally botched. So I love telling you about stuff that I lost money on. There is a 4-quadrant thing. Alex Leila and I have played with this often. Whenever you're evaluating an investment, whenever you're evaluating one, there's 4 very quick things that you think about. It is worth doing on paper. So there's 4 quick things, and I'll actually go through an example with you. The first thing that you want to think about is capital preservation. So if you're at a bank, your capital is fairly well preserved. That's number 1. Number 2, are there any tax advantages? Number 3, I'm not going to mess on terminology. The right terminology here is yield. Yield in our world is interest. Interest or a coupon or some kind of cash flow that you get along the way. That's what yield means. Yield is the right word, and I'll actually explain where that word comes from. And the last one is growth. And how does this investment grow over time? So let's take 2 quick examples. I think it'll really help you out. So my partner and I bought an olive farm. Please don't buy an olive farm ever. We bought an olive farm because my partner's son wanted to make olive oil, and I found a way. I was like, okay, this will work. So we bought this olive farm, and this olive farm came with an Airbnb with a bed and breakfast on it. So we had to hire someone to run it, all of that. But let's take this olive farm as an example. I always put a 25, 25, 25, 25 score. That way I end up with a 100 score. So if I take my olive farm and I take my capital preservation on it, my capital preservation on the olive farm is literally just land. So I'm just going to wager that the capital preservation on my olive farm is probably I'm just going to make it 25 out of 25 on the capital preservation. I'm making this up. Tax advantages. A lot of people don't know this, but in the state of California, you have significant agriculture advantages when you own a piece of agricultural land. I didn't know that. You get a bunch of tax credits from the state for actually owning agricultural land. I had no idea. So we got a bunch of tax credits. So I'm like, oh, that's cool. I'll take a little 20 on the tax advantages. And then yield. Yield literally is we were able to plant olives and sell olives while we owned the farm. So the farm actually produced some income for us. So I'm going to give that a little 20 score. And the growth, the farm didn't have a lot of growth. We almost sold it for what we bought it for. So I'm going to tell you that the growth on that was 0. It didn't really grow in any way. So let's total that up, right? So that's 25, 45, 65. So it's got a little 65 score. Very subjective. Good so far. Now let's do like Bitcoin. Capital preservation on Bitcoin. I'm going to tell you right now, it's pretty volatile, but we have no idea. So I'm going to give it a score. We may say Bitcoin is 10 because you have no idea if it can go to 0 tomorrow. The tax advantages, 0. Yield on Bitcoin, unless you do something fancy, you're probably a 5. Growth on Bitcoin, hey, it could be amazing. Go to 25. So now I'm on the Bitcoin of 25, 30, 40. While this does not need to be a black and white evaluation, it at least gives me an understanding of how to put one against the other. I know now that net, these are probably, compared to the risk, yeah, I probably had to put a little bit more money on this versus less money on this, but at least it allows you to evaluate an investment. Otherwise, we have no way of thinking about it. I want us to check the box. And I will tell you this, if it starts checking all boxes, it's starting to be a much more thoughtful investment. Every time, you're going to be able to start doing this naturally in your head, but wanted to kind of run this through. So before I go any further, let's take 10 seconds. As I went through that, what kind of stood out for you? Something that stood out, something that was interesting, something that was like, okay, cool, I can see how that I could use something like that. Can you explain yield? Yeah, for sure. So think of yield as when you invest something, the cash flow that you make back from it. So if I put my money in the bank and the bank pays me 1%, my yield is 1%. How the word yield came about was in the olden days where people did crop, they would plant a lot of rice, and the amount of rice it yielded was the yield, what came from the crop. So if you put $100,000 down and you got $600 back every month, that yield is $600. Does that kind of make sense, Nicholas? Cool, awesome. You can take the emotion out of it, but at least it gives you a way to analyze it in some way, right? At least gives you a way to say, okay, let me at least think through this. Because a lot of times we make a very like, oh my gosh, it's my friend's startup company, I'm going to do it. Well, capital preservation, 0. Tax advantages, 0. Yield, 0. Growth, 25. Do you have any idea how much money, like I've made money in startup investing. I've also lost a lot of money in startup investing. You just know what it is going in. That's all I'm going to suggest. All right, cool. Last one, and then we'll do some Q&A. All right, so here we go. Last one. This is where a lot of you are going to have some differences in opinion with me, and it's totally okay. I want to give you one framework for figuring out how you implement any investment strategy in your life, but I want to talk about the order of what you do. So if there's 4 phases to doing this, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4, right? Here's phase 1. I call phase 1 the safety trampoline. Alex has talked about this a couple times in his videos. First thing that you can do is to put aside a small amount of income that can take care of you for, I think Alex talked about 6 months, right? But 6 to 12 months of just baseline income. I'd say a 6-month minimum. I like the 12, and let me tell you why I like the 12. Because in 6 months, if you can live for 6 months and then use the other 6 months of income to actually invest to grow a business or something like that, you can quickly get yourself out of any hole. I will tell you, it completely changes your life when you know that if the world goes to hell in a handbasket, you still have the ability to completely reinvent yourself. Before you go out and write a $100,000 check into a startup, please write a $100,000 check into your startup, right? I would totally do that. So the number one thing that I would do, fundamentally, if you had to live and all your income went to 0, could you have enough to, without dramatically changing your lifestyle, could you handle, because the last thing you want is to get resentful and depressed when you have to change your lifestyle and all of that. Could you have enough for 6 to 12 months, whatever that kind of feeling is, so that you know that that's the first bucket that needs to get checked. Hey Alex, do you have thought, comment on this? Because I know you've done a couple of videos on this one too.
Yeah, and I want to just, as from a terminology thing, because I like language, Shiran calls it a safety trampoline, which has a much more positive connotation than the common term, which is safety net. So we don't just catch someone, we want to catch them and then bounce them off. In the video, I mean, Leila and I have a zillion years saved up, and that's because we're actually, believe it or not, very risk averse. And that's because we feel like we take enough risks in our lives that we want to make sure that once we have capital, we have something there and we don't have to think about it. So we're actually like, way more than 12. But when I'm trying to tell somebody who has 0 savings, if I say, 18 months or something, then I think people get really disheartened. So I try to make 3 and 6 months and let's gain momentum. And so for everyone on this call, I think there's this demonization of savings nowadays. And I think that is misplaced. I think it's people who are saying don't have savings who have savings and don't even think about that they have savings. But the other piece is that, especially if you have a percentage of your budget that you're putting away every month, you have to have that safety trampoline, because if your car breaks down or something else, that's going to disrupt your percentage of savings pattern. And it's just like going to the gym. It's like, this is just financial fitness. It's like, you don't want to stop that habit. And so it's good to have that net or that trampoline there so you can fix the thing and not disrupt the flow of money to where you have it allocated. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, spot on. If you took nothing away, I would say, by the way, and it's totally okay. I have 8-figure entrepreneurs that will come and hang out with me, and I'll be like, they have all this other stuff, and the reason they're stressed out is because they don't have 6 to 10. If all that goes awry, if Facebook ads stop working for 3 weeks, it freaks them out. And it's okay. You got to have something to know that your baseline doesn't change, right? So that's really important. Here's number 2. Number 2 is what do you buy? And I'll talk about the 3 buys. So number 1, you buy the safety trampoline. You want to buy that for yourself. Number 2, I'd love for you to buy time. It is shocking to me how much we minimize the value of buying time. And if this is getting a VA, if this is getting a bookkeeper, if this is if this is getting a driver for your family, the buying time and convenience, like Leila and I text about this all the time, like buying convenience is so important because it does one major thing. It allows you to be in a better place. And when you're in a better place, you make better decisions. Not that the time is important for you to do more revenue generating activities. That is actually a misnomer. What you want to think about is when you have time, it gives you be in a better place. And when you're in a better place, you make better decisions. So number 2 would be to buy time. So anything that you can say, hey, how can I write a check to buy this time? That's actually a really powerful investment because you're investing in a really great psychology for yourself so you can make better decisions. Here's number 3. Number 3 is Alex's favorite, is buying cash flow, or calling it buy income. And when I say buy income, it is, hey, can I write a check for $100,000 or $10,000 and start to get $1,000 back a month? I like that a lot. Even if your $10,000, $100,000 does not grow, you're buying income. Because at the end of the day, if you're working really hard right now and you can find a way for your work to replace the income that you're making, the definition of financial freedom is that your passive income or your leveraged income is greater than or equal to your monthly expenses. If you can just get there, your life is in a completely different place. How you think about it, how you work on it, how the things that you do, etc. So that is buying. And 4th, I would say you buy growth. And when I say buy growth, let's talk about that for a second. So all I'm saying here is if you don't have your safety trampoline, don't invest in your friend's startup. That would be my suggestion. It's a suggestion, do whatever you want. But it would make sense that you would do this first before you did that. It would make sense. And I'm suggesting an order that will really, really help, because as soon as you get your safety trampoline in order, and if you just follow this, heck, a lot of people will even just stop here. You don't even need to buy growth. If you can just buy cash flow, you're fine. Because if whatever you've invested in is paying you to live and paying you to have your family have a great life, you can literally do whatever you want with your life.